All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're thrilled to have you all here today. My name is Amy Landon. I am the Director of Communications at Bernheim. And we are here today as our last program in association with our For the Planet For You fall fundraising appeal campaign. And in this one, Evan Patrick, our Natural Areas Manager, is going to talk a little bit about some of the hidden wildlife of Bernheim. So we'll share some images of the trail cameras and things like that. And I know we have some new images. I'm really excited about that. And I apologize, I don't have a wild animal in my house. It's just my dog. So the goal of these programs this year was really to just have our team show you a little bit about all the work that we do at Bernheim day in and day out to help protect our 16,137 acres of land, and help connect people with nature every day. So we really appreciate the support we've already gotten. We're really close to our $50,000 fundraising goal, and we really to get there. So thank you all for your support. If you haven't yet donated, no dollar amount is too small. We appreciate supports of all kinds, and we'll show that link again at the end where you can donate if you want to. Speaking of wildlife, my dog is going crazy because there's deer in our front yard. So we really appreciate the support. And if you missed any of the previous programs, when you go onto that link that Evan will show at the end, you can see recordings of all the previous programs. So without further ado, and so I can put myself and my dog on mute, I'm going to let Evan go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Amy. So as Amy mentioned, my name is Evan Patrick. I am the Natural Areas Manager for Bernheim. So as you can see from this first slide today, we are going to be talking a little bit about the quote unquote hidden wildlife of Bernheim. So I think we're all pretty familiar with what Bernheim is, what it looks like, the flora of Bernheim, the plants and the trees and all those things that we get to see immediately when we come to Bernheim. But there are a lot of creatures out there that you really have to either hide and stay very quiet and stay very still to see, or install, in our case, trail cameras, so we actually get a chance to see some of the wildlife that exists in Bernheim. So as I go through these slides, we're just going to kind of go through these and talk about some of these animals. I want you to keep in mind a couple things. There are going to be some common themes while we look at these images. And the first one that we're going to think about when we look at this bobcat is the idea of quality of habitat. Now, so a bobcat is a kind of creature that is pretty diverse in the types of habitats that it can utilize, but these animals usually prefer deep wooded forest, large intact forest that's pretty quality habitat that has very dense wooded areas. So we get the chance to take photos of large cats like this in our forest. We also get to, if my screen will go to the next slide, perhaps. Let's try. Here we go. We also get the chance to see very large birds of prey like our golden eagles. And, well, too far. Here we go. We'll try this slow down a little bit. So these birds not only require something like really high quality habitat, these birds require very large habitat. So Bernheim is over 16,000 acres, and these birds need these very isolated, large, intact forest blocks to thrive. And just to give you an example of a large bird in a large forest, this is one of our golden eagles. This, as you can see from the date at the bottom of the picture, this was taken just this past weekend. So the golden eagles are back in Bernheim. I believe that this is Harper. These birds are really hard to tell the difference in their sex because they have very little sexual dimorphism, which means it's difficult to tell the difference between males and females. However, we do have the transponders on their backs, and at the time that this photograph was taken, Harper was in this area. We know he was based on his GPS coordinates. So we think this is Harper, but back to the idea of large animals in a large forest, you really get a good sense of the scale of this bird here. A common wingspan for a golden eagle is between 6 to 8 feet. So this photograph, if you measured tip to tip on his wing feathers, it's at a minimum 6 feet. So it's a large bird in a very large forest. So that's two of the major themes: quality of habitat, quantity of habitat. And then another thing that we like to think about is the close relationship of water with this wildlife. So here we see a North American beaver. As I'm sure most folks know, beavers really rely on streams and waterways to create habitat for themselves so that they can feed themselves. So those are the three kind of major things that we're going to think about: quantity, quality, and a close relationship with water. So a lot of, in the past, since basically white people have colonized the United States, the idea of beavers has been approached as a nuisance species. Beavers were commonly removed from habitats so that they could drain wet areas and use those areas as farmland. So as I'm sure you all know, Bernheim is a research forest, and some of the things that we're trying to research right now are trying to change the paradigm and think about the ecological value of what some would consider a nuisance species like a beaver. Beavers create dams, they make streams very dynamic and complex. They usually increase biodiversity. So we see them as a positive when it comes to habitat restoration. In a similar light, a lot of people, are you all seeing coyote or tanager or turtle?
Now we're back to coyote.
Okay, back to coyote, good. So a coyote historically has been a very persecuted animal, much like the beaver, because it is described as a nuisance species. This mainly because coyotes would prey upon stock animals. But we know from a lot of research done outside Bernheim that coyotes play a very important ecological role. They eat and find and get rid of carrion, which is basically dead animals. They help control, or they help promote bird species, and they reduce disease within habitats by eating that carrion. So, and they also reduce rodent populations. So we know that these animals that kind of have this bad reputation really do play a really strong role within their habitats. So that's something we try to promote here. And so the idea of quality and quantity habitat, and specifically close to waterways, these dogs, these coyotes can exist next to humans very well, but we're seeing them also thrive in a very large intact forest like Bernheim as well. So this is one of, okay, it keeps skipping ahead 2 photos for me. No? Okay, let's try that. This is scarlet tanager. This is a migratory songbird. And again, we like to think of the idea of Bernheim as this very large intact habitat. And these birds use Bernheim as a migratory area to come to Bernheim. So, without this habitat, these birds have fewer and fewer places to go. And that's another kind of theme that I'm going to highlight on today is habitat loss. I'm going to peek at my notes real quick. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology released a study last year. Since 1970, eastern forest birds have lost 170 million individuals since 1970. That's a 17% reduction in population since 1970. It's an incredibly significant amount of population loss, and big spaces like Bernheim are really important right now because we need to conserve these spaces so that species like the scarlet tanager can thrive. I'm gonna try to go forward without going too far forward. So this is a pretty, it's done again. This is a pretty common species, eastern box turtle. Now, this is something that you could see, if you live in a relatively rural area, a species that you could see in your backyard or near a stream or something like that. But again, with this species as well, with the combination of land development and roadkill, basically, this species has been listed as a vulnerable species. So you might think of some of these animals as very common, but without areas like Bernheim, we are losing this habitat. So we need to emphasize the idea of keeping and conserving these areas. Now, this is a particularly interesting creature. Well, this is a mink. And so this is a relatively, I don't want to say common, but it's not an uncommon species, but it's very private, and without things like trail cameras, it's almost impossible. They're very rare to see. And this creature in this part of it, it's pretty ubiquitous across the United States, but in this part of the country, these are primarily, they eat aquatic creatures. So they eat things like fish and crawdads, and that's why we will commonly see minks next to a water source. It's a pond or mostly streams. But again, like the idea of streams and headwaters in Bernheim, they're integral to the species that use this space within the forest. So here we see one of, let me go back again, one of our golden eagles. This is not one that we have tracked, actually. If you look on the tail of this bird, you'll see that large white streak. That's an indication that this is a juvenile golden eagle. So I'm sure as you all have heard, Harper and Athena, very likely based on our data, have hatched and raised a chick and brought that fledgling down to the United States at some point, possibly to Bernheim. We're not sure. But it is possible, this photograph was captured last year when the eagles were in Bernheim, that this could be an offspring of Harper and Athena. We're not sure of that. It's a possibility, but it's exciting to know that Bernheim has such quality and quantity of habitat that we have multiple golden eagles within Bernheim. We think up to at least a dozen eagles that we have seen within Bernheim, including Harper and Athena. This is one of maybe the, well, I skipped to the charismatic one. We'll go back to the maybe less charismatic muskrat. This is another very kind of hard to see creature. You don't see these animals very often. They don't have a very great reputation either, but something that I want you to take away from this is that all these creatures that have had or do still have poor reputations, they have a very important ecological role, and they all play that role somehow in Bernheim. And much like the beavers, the muskrat, the way it eats and the way it eats around wet and streamy wetland areas, it also promotes biodiversity of herbaceous species and woody species. So, you know, it's thought of this kind of gross, greasy animal, but really it does play a function within the habitat at Bernheim. Now, this is just like one of the most adorable pictures, this beautiful juvenile screech owl. Each year we do something called mist netting, which is basically a large net that is set out in high traffic areas. And we try to take an inventory of the bird species that are in Bernheim habitats. And I think this was 2 or 3 years ago that this screech owl was captured in a mist net, and we could see the mother up in the tree carefully watching us as we pulled the bird out of the net and let it go, and it flew right back up to the mother. It's just a very cool interaction with the habitat at or with the wildlife at Bernheim. So I like to show these pictures of salamanders. Amphibians and reptiles are really good indicator species. And what that means is that some species are very sensitive to environmental changes and pollution and things like that. And amphibians and reptiles are indicator species. So the fact that we have a very strong, thriving population of salamanders, of several species of salamanders throughout Bernheim, is a really good indication, back to that idea of quality of habitat, that we have really high quality habitat at Bernheim. So this is this would keep in the same slide. This is our golden eagle breeding pair. So like I said before, with sexual dimorphism, golden eagles don't display very much sexual dimorphism. On the back, on their tail feather, it's very difficult to see. The males have a certain type of banding and the females have a different type of banding on their tails. Without looking directly at their tail feathers, it's very difficult to see which is the male and which is the female. But we know, based on, you can kind of see on the back, the feathers are sticking up, and based on the GPS coordinates, this is Athena and Harper. right at one of our bait sites, feeding on a deer at the same time. It's phenomenal to be able to sit out in a blind and watch these animals. It's just, they are some of the least studied animals in the world. And to be able to know that they are in Bernheim using our habitat, it's just phenomenal. And we're very proud of these birds and we're happy to have them. And it's great to show off these pictures. And another frequent guest at our bait sites, this is a great part of the golden eagle season, is we have cameras out everywhere at all of our bait sites, multiple cameras at each bait site. And the birds are not the only animals that eat them. The birds are diurnal, which means that they are active during the daytime. So during the nighttime, we get the nocturnal creatures that come out. And most of the time, we will see things like possum, raccoon, sometimes bobcat, but very frequently we see coyote. They are some of the most efficient scavengers of the forest. So they will come out and they will clean up any kind of carrion, any kind of dead animal in the forest. And it's very common to see these coyotes out there. So I think this is a really great picture because you can really see the effectiveness of camouflage with these animals. This is broad daylight, 10:05 in the morning. And if you glanced across this creek bed, it's very likely you wouldn't even see that bobcat was there. These are incredibly stealthy animals, very difficult to see. And again, this is the idea of quantity and the importance of stream and water in Bernheim. Here's a mother bobcat, probably looking for food along a stream inside Bernheim. And here's another pretty charismatic bird. This is a wild turkey. This is a male wild turkey doing what's known as a strut. So you can see how puffed up his feathers are. His tail feathers are sticking straight up, and he's basically showing off to anyone that might be around, both male and female, that he's the biggest and baddest wild turkey around. Bernheim was actually part of the reintroduction of wild turkey. We had a very strong population at the time when turkey was being reintroduced, and some turkey were collected at Bernheim and distributed so that the population could rebound. So we're very pleased to brag about that. And again, it's just an indicator of the health and the quality of the habitat at Bernheim. This is another one of our migratory songbirds. I don't want to harp on the terrible information about the reduction of birds, but it's just really important that we have the space at Bernheim that we do for these migratory songbirds to come up here during the summertime. Here's another photo. Well, okay, I'm going to actually leave it on this one. So speaking of, well, I got another one. Speaking of camouflage, this bobcat during this time of year, this was taken this weekend on one of our bait sites. And these animals just disappear into this kind of winter, dormant, warm season grass landscape. Beautiful creatures. It's pretty rare to see a bobcat moving around like this at daytime. I am very excited about this year because on this specific bait site, I got about 4 dozen photographs of this bobcat. So I'm going to sit out in the blind, hopefully in the next couple of weeks in the very early morning, and hopefully I will get to catch a glimpse of this bobcat out there. So here's another one. This photograph is from what we call Golden Eagle Ridge, and we're looking across the Wilson Creek Valley right now. And the opposite ridge over there is the opposite ridge of Golden Eagle Ridge, and this is one of the primary sites where the eagles come and eat. And it's pretty phenomenal. This is a really great picture. If you look at the inside of the wing, so if we think that their wingspan is between 6 and 8 feet, you can imagine that these primary flight feathers, the primary wing feathers on the inside of this wing are massive. These are just very large birds, very impressive, very regal, elegant animals. And it's to get these up close photos is pretty rare, and to be able to share these with you all is very exciting. Here's another one of our salamanders. And so something that's been really great about, let me go back one, about our trail camera captures is that we've gotten to know some individuals. So this coyote, it's kind of hard to see, but if you look at his right ear, how it's kind of drooping, right? So this one, aside from droopy ear, doesn't have much of a nickname, but we've seen this individual coyote many, many times. And they have been displaying some interesting behavior where it seems that he's the first and last to eat. He's the first and last on the site. There are usually several other coyotes around waiting in the back until he's done eating. But he's one that we look for and one that we see often. And I haven't seen him yet this year, but I'm excited to keep up with the trail cameras and see if we can see him. So this is another of our migratory songbirds. This is a Louisiana water thrush, and this bird has a life tag on it. It's this very small chip that basically, it's part of this bird tracking system called MODIS wildlife tracking, and we have nodes throughout Bernheim, and there are also nodes on the eastern seaboard, basically from I want to say New York all the way down to Tennessee and Florida. And when a bird passes by this node, it pings on that node. And the idea is that we can, because these are migratory birds, we can understand the migratory patterns of these birds as they move up and down the coast. And so this is kind of a younger program. I think we've been doing it for 2 years now, I believe. But this is one of the 5 species that we have been tracking. And the program is relatively new, so there aren't a whole lot of nodes right now, so it's difficult to track them. So we're trying to get some more support down in some of these southern states so that we can get more nodes set up so we can see more and more of the patterns of their migration. So even though Bernheim is very large, and the quality of the habitat is phenomenal, and we have all of these headwaters and waterways, conflict is a common thing in nature. And to see something like this, even if these are the 2 breeding pair golden eagles, there is still a fight for resources, right? This is not uncommon. It's more common to see it happen between different species. It's very common at our bait sites to see golden eagles and bald eagles competing over bait. But this is, this is something we expect to see, and will not be the last time that we see perhaps some golden eagles competing over some food. I think this is another great picture of one of our golden eagles. You can really see, again, just the size of these animals. This is a pretty interesting spot. We noticed when we were sitting in our blind that there was a specific walnut tree that the birds preferred to sit upon. And so we made the decision to climb up that tree and put a trail camera directly on the tree where they were sitting. So we got some really good images of the birds, both bald eagles and golden eagles, sitting on this tree. Here's our beaver again. This is, I think, an interesting photo because historically, before settlers came to the United States, beavers were primarily diurnal, which meant that they were active during the daytime, and they were so heavily hunted by early settlers that within just a couple hundred years, they changed their behavior to become primarily nocturnal. People don't give wildlife credit often enough about how intelligent they can be. Not only was this animal smart enough to totally species-wide change its behavior to protect itself, but these animals are incredible engineers. If you ever get the chance to see a beaver dam up close or to see a beaver lodge, what they are capable of doing is incredible. I mean, they can hold back feet and feet of water, and it's not haphazard. It's usually sticks that are laid down parallel to the stream. Then leaf litter falls in behind that, and they pack in mud, and then they pack in stones on top of that. I mean, it is really, truly incredible engineering. The beaver has become one of my favorite animals since I've been interacting with them more and more at Bernheim. They're pretty incredible creatures. So this is another one of the migratory songbirds, and it also has a life tag on there. I believe the purple martin is one of the ones that we have pinged the most recent. It's traveling up and down the eastern seaboard of the United States. This is a beautiful bird. This is a white-eyed vireo. This one doesn't have a life tag, but this is one that was caught in the mist netting. Just absolutely gorgeous. Still pretty a common bird, but to get the chance to be this close to it and to witness it, it's a phenomenal event for sure. I know you've seen the golden eagle several times in this presentation, but they're too cool to not talk about, you know, just. And actually you can see on this photograph, the feathers poking up on the back, that's where the transponder is located on their back. And it's basically like it's less than an ounce, very small, and it kind of rests like a backpack with elastic on their back. Sounds like it could potentially be uncomfortable, but it doesn't seem to affect the birds at all, which is beneficial. Here's another coyote at one of our bait sites. Oh wait, no, that was the bobcat. And again, like, I don't know if you all can see it if the video feed is in the way, but this is another example of a conflict at one of our bait sites. It's rare to see an actual physical conflict. Usually one animal will kind of outflex the other and scare the other one off. But this is, again, it's, you know, when resources are short, especially in some time like January in deep winter, sometimes conflicts do happen. So this is the same branch from that last photograph of the golden eagle. We got some really phenomenal pictures of bald eagles and golden eagles. They are pretty competitive at the bait sites, and they compete for those resources. But it's just really great to see them coexisting at the site. And so this is where it gets a little tricky with some identification. If you're not very well versed in the patterns and the marbling of these birds, it's easy to confuse a juvenile bald eagle and a golden eagle. But once you get out the patterns and the shape of the beak, it's pretty easy to tell, even from a distance, between a golden eagle and a juvenile bald eagle. And you can see here that white underneath the wing, that's pretty consistent with the bald eagle, but specifically that very straight and then sharp curved beak, that's a bald eagle. Here's another coyote. See our turkey tom again. You can really see him strutting in that one with his tail straight up and big poofy feathers. Yeah, so here's another juvenile bald. You can really see that dappled marbling. That's very common with bald eagles. You won't really see that much at all with a golden eagle. So that's just kind of a brief overview of some of the wildlife that we see at Bernheim. I do want to bring up real quick, we are still in the midst of trying to prevent this LG&E pipeline being installed on Bernheim property. And right now, the Division of Water is basically accepting comments. They want comments from the public, and we would love your all's help. We need your voice to come out and say that this is something that you don't agree with. We don't agree with it on an ethical basis. We don't agree with it on a basically the idea of propagating fossil fuels to install infrastructure that will last for another 50 to 60 to 70 years. We think that's the wrong direction to go. So we want your voice to talk about this to the public and let everyone know what you think about the LG&E pipeline. So I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you all for coming here. I do really appreciate, I hope you know that all these things that I talked about, all this wildlife, the quality, the quantity, the streams, the waterways, none of that would be possible without your all support. So this For the Planet, for you, that's true. You know, the idea of For the Planet and for you, your support not only allows you to come out and enjoy Bernheim, but allows Bernheim to thrive and allows my team and me to be good stewards of this land so that these animals and these plants can thrive. So I do truly appreciate your support, both you know, financially and otherwise. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Evan, we have a few questions if you're
Sure.
ready.
I am.
All right. Can you elaborate more on the process of mist netting? How does this process work?
So basically, we isolate and locate areas that are high traffic areas for migratory songbirds, and that's usually gaps in trees. It's usually near creeks, areas that we have located that we have a pretty good idea that these birds are going to be moving through there. And then if you think of like a very, very fine, almost like badminton net that is strung up about 20 feet wide across this kind of gap. And as the birds fly, they run into this net, and that net is fine enough that it doesn't injure the animals. And we can pull them out, and they're not harmed, and they can be sent on their way. And it's you have to be certified to do it. So this isn't something that someone can just go out and do it. Not only to handle animals, but to do it safely so that you don't harm the animals. So we have certified folks that come out and help us with that, and it's a scientific process for sure.
All right, thank you. The next one is, a lot of people on the internet make wild and unsubstantiated claims of coyotes and hawks eating and carrying away pet dogs and cats. Can you provide us some factual data to counter these claims?
So that's something I've been hearing basically my entire life, right? Especially as growing up in Eastern Kentucky, less the hawks, but I think it is just such an ingrained cultural idea that coyotes are bad, that it's hard to promote and change any kind of paradigm shift on that idea is really tricky.
What's the problem here?
I think that it's what is tough to prove is that, you know, a lack of evidence is, it's hard to prove that you can't, you know, a hawk picking up a dog or a cat, right? You know, it's to scientifically prove that is difficult. But I think that what we have to remember is that, and again, this is a difficult conversation to have with anybody, but this wildlife has just as much a right to exist and to thrive as we do. That doesn't mean that we can't live alongside this wildlife in a way that's mutually beneficial. But I think promoting the idea of ecological roles and the functionality of what these animals do, that can turn the tide, I hope. Also, just the general idea that a coyote is not a dangerous animal. You know, there may be certain circumstances where it could happen if an animal is sick or something, but I think we all know and have been told for a very long time that, you know, that animal is more afraid of you than it is than you are of it. So I think it's the idea of conservation, the idea of talking to people about the significance of these species and bringing up these ideas of ecological significance. I think that's the way to change the conversation about that.
All right. A reminder to everybody, if you have questions, feel free to enter them into the chat and I will ask them. What areas are the best for node targets within the MODIS system? Is it a mix of urban and natural environments? What is the overarching goal of MODIS, and does the importance of corridor connectivity play into that goal?
So wildlife habitat connectivity is something that Bernheim puts at the forefront. My team plus my supervisor, that is something that my supervisor, Andrew Berry, the director of conservation, he's been working on for years, is the idea of connecting these wildlife corridors so that animals and plants can move in the way that they would have before human development. So specifically about MODIS, as of now, I believe that the primary objective is areas that are natural areas. I don't know that they have installed any in more urban areas. They might do some of that's like peri-urban, where it's just outside of, I wouldn't call it suburban necessarily, but I'm not sure specifically about urban versus rural. My understanding right now is that most of the nodes are in very rural areas, like Bernheim, and a large significant portion of them are up in Pennsylvania. which may be where Modus is operated out of. This project has been going on longer than I've been at Bernheim. I came to Bernheim about a year ago, so a lot of these projects I'm kind of, catching up to speed on. The overarching goal, my understanding, is to be able to collect data so that research can be done about migratory habits of songbirds and the impact of habitat loss. That's something that Bernheim is interested in, is habitat conservation, habitat loss, and habitat loss specifically due to climate change. So I'm actually currently working on what I'm calling a rubric or a guideline for specific research topics. And basically what it's going to be is a document where we say, okay, we're going to push this out to research institutions across the nation and say, Bernheim is a 16,000 acre intact research forest. These are the 16 topics that we are specifically interested in researching because they align with our mission statement and with our goals, and push that out into the research sphere. And one of the big things is going to be habitat loss and the effect of human interaction with habitat and development. So yes, habitat connectivity and migratory patterns, that's the overarching goal for Modus.
All right, I think that was all the questions. Unless somebody else has one, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves and ask it. I did put the link to the campaign with the other recordings, and if you would be kind enough to make a donation, that's in the chat function as well, so you can view that link there. But feel free to keep asking questions, and if I don't see any in the next few minutes, we'll wrap this up. All right. Well, Evan, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for coming. And oh, Mark, Evan, can you remind people the deadline for the comment period is on the screen as well, but it's December 18th.
Yes.
So that's tomorrow.
That is tomorrow, yes. If you could just hop right off this and go write a comment, we would greatly appreciate that.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming. Everybody have a wonderful, safe, and happy holidays. And
Thank you.
See you out at Bernheim soon.